So this is a video response to Guns Coast to Coast. In the comments section we were talking about 80% receivers, the character of these businesses that make 80% receivers, lightning links, and solvent trap suppressors. What we need to do is talk about three different things, because there's actually three different things in play here. One of them is, what is a firearm? The next one is, what is a machine gun? And what is easily convertible? In the definition of easily convertible, that means how easy it is for a layman to make a firearm out of it, or take what's called an unserviceable receiver and restore it to serviceability. Now, the issue you have is most of these definitions and rules are impacted by machine guns, and the court looks at consistency. So if you're applying definitions and rules consistently on machine guns and on semi-automatics and other types of firearms, that's something the court would uphold under case law. So first of all, what is a firearm receiver? And this is the crux of the issue with ATF. And the problem ATF has is, under their definition and the legal definitions and rules, an AR-15 lower receiver may not be considered a firearm under federal law. And the reason is, a receiver is defined as having a way to attach a barrel containing trigger mechanism, firing mechanism, that kind of thing. And when you look at an AR-15 lower receiver that's fully manufactured and ready to be put in service as a firearm, that piece of the firearm does not contain enough of the definition of a receiver to be considered a receiver. Now, the federal government has dropped several felon in possession of a firearm cases because a receiver is a firearm under federal law. And if it doesn't meet the definition of being a firearm, you can't convict a felon of possessing a firearm. So there's an ex-ATF officer that's been testifying in federal cases over the last couple of years that an AR-15 lower receiver is not a firearm. So instead of letting the court decide whether that is a firearm, ATF has dropped some of those cases to avoid an AR-15 lower receiver being ruled not a firearm. So the government doesn't want to take the chance that an AR-15 lower will be classified as not a firearm under federal law. And if that occurred, the whole enforcement of what is a firearm and what isn't a firearm by the definition of a receiver would come into play. Now, when you look at the big picture, in 1967, the NFA was overturned because of constitutional defects, and that's their language. One of the defects was in the process you could incriminate yourself. The other part is it was unenforceable because of the complexity of the issues, and an average person couldn't tell what was legal and what's illegal. The main focus of the federal government and ATF in enforcing all of these lightning link, 80% lowers, firearm kits, all this is aimed at trying to clean up the unconstitutionality of National Firearm Act and the Gun Control Act 68. Because what they want to do is take away any issues on what is a firearm and what is not a firearm. Because once you get to be constitutionally vague, it's unenforceable, and it would be declared unconstitutional on the basis of that, not that it violated the Second Amendment. So the government is trying to eliminate the law being declared vague on the definition of firearms. Because if you look at the big picture, if you look at the various Mossberg firearms that are now legal that have a 14-inch barrel and 12 gauge, for years they put people in jail for having weapons in that configuration. So when you look at this as the big picture, what is a machine gun, what is a firearm, what is a receiver, what is easily convertible, what is a serviceable receiver, all that is becoming so complex that the law is becoming constitutionally vague. So if the ATF attacks the solvent trap as a easily convertible silencer, because basically you drill 2 holes and you thread a hole, most courts would say that that is easily convertible. So that's how they're going to go after that. When you look at 80% lowers and kits to complete them, the whole myth of an 80% lower is advertising. It's not a legal definition. If you go back before the 1986 ban on machine gun manufacture, you could buy what they characterized as an 80% lower receiver for a machine gun, and if you were a class 2 manufacturer, you could complete that, or you could build a dummy gun out of it. Now, the definition of a firearm is based on how readily it can be made to fire one shot. So the 80% receiver rule is a myth. The ATF goes by 2 things on receivers. One is whether it's a serviceable receiver and can easily be made to a serviceable receiver. And I'll give you an example. On the Browning 1919 A4 and all the Maxim guns, you'll notice the parts kits have all the side plates, top and bottom plates, all the rivets have been removed. The reason for that is a 1919 A4 in a court case was considered a firearm even though it wasn't a machine gun in parts kit form, because the side plate that was not classified as a machine gun was still riveted to the top plate and bottom plate. ATF laid it on the side, got it to fire 1 round, so it was declared a firearm. That's a case law. So if you can easily restore a weapon to fire, that is a firearm. It doesn't matter if it's 80% complete. It doesn't matter if it's been cut in half. You can take a cut in half Sten gun receiver like this and wrap it in duct tape and get it to fire. That's a machine gun, and it only has to fire 1 round. When we look at receivers, what's going to happen is you're going to have the receiver rules that were put in place for machine guns applied to semi-automatic weapons. So for instance, this Sten submachine gun, if you're going to demill this and it be legally a non-firearm, they actually give you a drawing that shows you where to make cuts, and it's cut into 4 pieces at a minimum. So the ATF, under their rulemaking authority that was given to them under Gun Control Act 68, they actually tell you where to cut receivers. Now, on what they call an 80% receiver, certain machining operations for that particular receiver cannot have been made for that to qualify as a non-firearm. And the 80% rule is not hard and fast. It's mythical. And I'll give you an example. On this Sten submachine gun, let's say you were going to make an 80% receiver, that's a non-firearm. And what you do is you cut the bolt tracks here for the handle, you cut the ejection port, and you cut the feed port, but you don't cut any of the trigger mechanism. And then you say that's an 80% receiver. Well, it's not, because it's a machine gun, because you end up with what's called a rattle gun. And the ATF would consider the handle as a trigger, because you don't need a trigger mechanism in an open bolt weapon to make it fire. And it's classified as a rattle gun, and if you look at case law, you'll see this. So even without a trigger mechanism, if you cock this bolt and you put a mag in it and you let the bolt go forward, it's going to fire all the rounds in magazine. So it would classify it as a machine gun and a firearm regardless of whether it was 80% complete or not. What I foresee happening is the ATF is going to move ahead, and they're going to take the easily convertible definitions of a firearm, which basically says a qualified, skillful gunsmith machinist with a full machine shop and unlimited time on their hands. And if they can make that 80% receiver a firearm, then it's going to be a firearm. That's what they're going for. And like I said, the reason they're going after all of this stuff is to remove the constitutionally vague issues they have with gun enforcement. Because if you look at the braces, pistol braces, until recently, any brace, whether it was connected to the gun or not, was considered a shoulder stock, and they actually put people in jail for that. And ATF changed their mind on that and basically legalized what's called a brace for a pistol. Now, the problem is, what is the difference in functionality between a short-barreled rifle and a pistol with a brace? And then you look at the fact that a short-barreled shotgun or an AOW versus a Mossberg Shockwave shotgun. You get to the point where the definition of what's legal and what's not is vague, and the average person can't look at the gun and tell whether it's legal. That pushes things to the point of unconstitutionality like it did in 1967. So the government at all costs is trying to avoid that issue. Now, as to the companies making these items, they knew before they made the first one, in my opinion, that these things may not have qualified to be a non-firearm. They knew that this would be an issue in the future. So these companies knew all this, and I've been in this business for over 30 years as a licensed manufacturer, and I've known a lot of people in this business and a lot of businesses, and in my opinion, a lot of things that people do, they know are right on the verge of being an issue, and they will be happy to sell you that issue to make themselves money on the low probability it will be enforced. But the problem is, big picture wise, the government has a real issue with constitutional vagueness of firearm laws, and what they're trying to do is use these issues to clean that up. So please comment, rate, subscribe. We'll see you on the next video.